Cool. Right, guys, welcome to episode 10 of the Real Talk with ECO podcast. Today, we're fortunate enough to be joined by a former Premier League footballer, Matt Piper, Sunderland and Leicester. Leicester born. Matt, how are you doing, mate? How are you doing? You all right?
Leicester born indeed, my friend. Yeah, I'm very good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
No, mate, it's a pleasure, and we're just chatting there. You had quite a unique career in football. In that, and you had some challenges thrown your way. For those who weren't aware of your career in football, do you want to just kind of give a brief overview of your time in the Premier League?
Yeah, I will do, mate. It was brief. I sort of grew up in Leicester, as you said, born in Leicester, grew up in Leicester, sort of went all the way through the general channels that young footballers normally do when they play for their hometown club. Got in the first team around 19, played 20 or so games for Leicester City, and then we got relegated out of the Premier League. And then Sunderland came a-calling, who was still in the Premier League. And it was a big move for me, but I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave Leicester. I'm sort of a hometown boy. All my family's here, all my friends were here. And I was just looking forward to playing for Leicester in the Championship.
Yeah.
But that wasn't to be. The club were on the administration, so they said they needed the money. So reluctantly at the start, I moved to Sunderland. But when I got there, I loved it. The passion in the fans, the football club, the way they looked after me when I first got in there. And I started really well, but then I got injured after the first 12 or so games. And then literally from then on for the next 4 years was just injury after injury. And in the end, I think I only played, 30, 40 games for Sunderland in a 4 or 5 year period. So it turned into a bit of a nightmare, mate.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you can tell from my accent, I'm from the northeast, but I'm on the other side of the water. Well, my allegiance is on the other side of the water. I actually work in Sunderland, but I'm a mag through and through. Was there something about your sort of your upbringing in Leicester and the kind of people? Because I've been to Leicester a few times and I've seen and spoke to a lot of the people, and there seems to be a correlation between you guys down there and us up here, just hard work and grafting people. Did you find that when you came up to the northeast that there was a similarity in the type of people?
Yeah, without doubt, mate. I mean, before I came up, the first time I came up was to meet Peter Reid. And I was thinking, Sunderland, where's that? And I thought, I did. I had to have a look on the map. And because I travelled out of Leicester a lot, but normally it was further down south.
Yeah.
And the furthest north I went really was Nottingham.
Yeah.
So it was a big shock to me. And the first time I went up there and the people, what's good, what I love most about the Northeast is the people, how friendly they are.
Yeah.
And I thought it was going to be opposite. But you sort of go out in London. I was going out in London at the time when I was playing for Leicester and going down there a lot. And people sort of don't talk to you. Yeah. No one says morning or how you doing. Strangers on the street, which I found weird. But as soon as I got to Sunderland, and it wasn't because I was a footballer, because no one really knew me at that time. So when I was up in the Northeast and people are friendly and how you doing and you stopping talking to strangers on the street, I think that's what's very similar to the sort of upbringing that I had in Leicester. So I'd agree that we're from like similar backgrounds, definitely.
Did that sort of make it easier for you to settle in the area? The fact that you felt a sort of a similarity between the people and the people back home?
It did, mate. And I'll tell you, I'll be honest. When I was coming up there, I didn't see many people that looked like me.
Yeah.
So I thought, normally when that happens, you think, I wasn't expecting racism or anything like that, but you feel Leicester's very multicultural.
Yeah.
So you sort of walking around and no one takes a second look. You sort of get up into Sunderland and I didn't see another black person for the first few days. And so you're a little bit on edge. But what sort of changed that very quickly was how warm and welcoming the people are. And I knew that wasn't just because I was playing for Sunderland. It was everywhere I went in the Northeast, older folk, younger kids, everyone just being really warm and welcoming. So I settled in very quickly because of that fact.
Yeah, I think in having spent a little bit of time in London myself, it's like when you go to London, they automatically assume that you mean harm or you mean something, you mean bad. Whereas in the northeast, I think it's sort of like you're innocent until you're proven guilty type of thing. So when you come up to the northeast, you're one of us. Until you step out of line, or until you, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of skin colour, it's just a case of you come up here, you embed yourself in our culture, and you're one of us. That's it. And whereas it's the opposite. The further south you go, it's the automatically assume ill of you. And do you know what I mean? So it is. And a lot of people have said that especially about Newcastle, but I don't think it's just Sunderland that has that. It's you've got Yorkshire and Sheffield. I was there yesterday, and like. It's a very northern thing. When you go to London, it just turns into, I mean, I remember opening a door. I can't remember where I was, but somewhere around King's Cross. Opening a door for this old lady, and she looked at us as if I was going to mug her or something. And you just think, like, hold on a minute. Like, I'm doing, respect your elders. That's how I was brought up. So you do that. And then she just looked at us, and it was as if to say, like, you're going to steal me bag or something. And you just think, like, how is that even,
Spot on, mate.
Yeah, it's
that's exactly what it's like. They're very down south. It's very cynical thinking.
Yeah,
like when people are wary of everyone, and listen, I love dipping in and out of London, and I always have done. But I'd never want to live down there. It's not as friendly and as open as I like, Leicester or the northeast.
Because I think didn't you say as well on one of the podcasts I listened to, that there was an opportunity for you to go to Southampton at the same time as there was Sunderland. Do you ever do you ever think that opinion that the further south you go, the sort of the more sceptical people are? Do you think that might have changed if you'd spent a lot more time sort of further south? Do you think, or do you think that wouldn't have changed your opinion?
It may have changed me as a person, because I think a lot of people that you meet in London are not actually from London. Yeah. They're from further north or further south, and they go to London to work and end up living there, and it changes them as people. My older brother was from London, right. And he was always a friendly character, but he moved away to Birmingham because he was a professional cricketer. My older brother, not many people know that. He played for Warwickshire, right. And he played for Warwickshire, and he's really quite famous because when Brian Lara scored the 501. That is still a record today. My brother was at the other end scoring his biggest score ever, 193, I think. So he sort of gave me the inside scoop on London. Yeah. And as a youngster, because he lived with my grandma and granddad, because he was at cricketing college down in London when I was younger, and he sort of gave me the inside scoop that, listen, don't trust anyone down here. Yeah. So that I think it's inbred into the people that live down in London that you got to be cynical. But I think it might have changed me as a person if I had moved south rather than north. Because the funny thing was, when I finished at Sunderland, I realised that I become much more of an open person, even what I was before I got to Sunderland.
Yeah. So obviously you moved to Sunderland, injury sort of curtailed the footballing career, and then obviously you had a period of trying to find and figure out what your new thing was. Now it's widely sort of publicised, and you've been quite open about it, which I think helps, about your struggles with addiction, alcohol, and finding something to replace football. Do you think that's made you, having gone through that, do you think that's made you better as a person, but also as a businessman now?
I think so, mate. It's so difficult to sort of put my finger on, the guy I am now, and how I got to become this guy. Yeah. And was it because I went through all the low periods and sort of came through them, the depression, the addiction to drugs and drink. Some of the nightmare situations that I put myself in and put people that I loved in who were very close to me. It's hard to put my finger on because I'd still like to think that I would be this guy now, but common sense tells you I probably wouldn't be. Yeah. because you develop into a person through experience.
So I think there's a what I've found and seen in businesses, there's a correlation, especially with mental health. And there's an expectation, especially as a man, to be bulletproof. You know, you can't talk about mental health. You just got to suck up and get on with it, and just, you know. Do you think that's when you've gone into business? Do you think you've been more aware of taking it easy, sussing out stress points, and looking after yourself a little bit better? If you'd just gone straight from football into business and never had that experience that you had, would you be less appreciative of the importance of looking after your body and your mind? You know what I mean? Like, would that have changed you, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. That's one thing I can say without doubt. I mean, some of the situations that I sort of went through allow you. One good thing that it allows you to gain a lot more empathy.
Yeah.
And when you have empathy, especially in business, people think it's a weakness. I don't think it is. I think it's powerful, having empathy. Yeah, and because when you're making business decisions or you're trying to grow, and a lot of the things that I do is relationships with different people and partnerships throughout the business, and that has helped me massively grow the FSD Academy to sort of where it is now.
I think, again, you hit the nail on the head there with empathy. Like, you show any, 10, 15 years ago, you show any empathy to anyone, it was seen exactly as that is a weakness. You know, like, there's something wrong with you if you're, thinking about this person's feelings or whatever. But, like, I mean, the size of our business now, I mean, we've got about 500 people. And, like, you can't not grow a business or any kind of team, for that matter, to, put it in context for you. You're trying to grow a team of management within your academy, the players, everyone. If you have no empathy, you've lost the dressing room. Do you know what I mean? Like, just people aren't going to respond to you if you don't sort of show that level of self-awareness and empathy. On the Under the Kosh podcast that I'd listened to, you mentioned like two really, really important words for me. Was focus and structure. Coming out of that period, where you struggle with alcohol and drugs and you kind of lost your purpose a little bit. You said, you mentioned focus and structure. You mentioned you've replaced now football with business. You've got a goal to kind of to keep your focus on. Does that evolve for you? Does that is there a incremental goals that you set yourself to keep your sort of interest, to keep you fresh, or is there just one overarching goal that you strive for?
No, for me, it's always evolving. The first purpose, like I said, when the purpose to own my own academy and help inner city kids from Leicester started back in 2009, while I was in rehab in 2009. I didn't actually get the academy started until late 2016. But it was a building process. So I had the thought, I want to own my own academy and I want to have 50, 60, 70 kids. And I want my own premises and I want to run a life skills program with it. So there was all these ideas, but that was the huge goal that I had. What has really helped me over the years is setting short-term goals, but the huge goal is out in front. So that purpose, what I talk about, is always pulling me forward. Always. If you set your goals too small, as soon as you've achieved it, that's when the structure comes away from my life, the focus comes away, and there's nothing pulling me forward anymore. And that's all right if you're ready to then set a new goal, but I'd prefer to set a massive goal early on, and then set small goals to try and pull you forward, because while you've still got that big goal and you've not completed what you've wanted to do yet, that's what's going to pull you forward. And that was the trouble with me in my football career. You know, if you ask me from 8 years old, all I ever want to do is see myself on Match of the Day, win trophies, and be a professional footballer playing in the Premier League. Now, once you get to 19 and you're living that huge goal that you had, what was important then, I should have set another goal.
Yeah.
And I would have had another purpose to keep me moving forward. And I didn't use any of these skills as soon as I become a professional footballer. So what
Yeah.
happens when that is all over because of injury? There's no goal there, there's no purpose, and then life for me became a real struggle.
Yeah. I mean, I think as well. I mean, at the time, I mean, you were 19. What was that sort of 1994? How old were you when you signed for Sunderland?
Yeah, year 2000, but I
Two.
signed for Sunderland in
So
2002.
if you think, you think about that, the world in terms of content and influence is a very different place. Like we now, you go on LinkedIn or Facebook, and you always see these videos or graphics of motivational stuff, and always invest in yourself and stuff. Like you didn't, we didn't have that in 2000.
No,
Do you know what I mean? 2002. So like, it's one of those things where kids now that are in your situation, or in the situation you found yourself in as a young professional footballer, have more support and more influence and inspiration and guidance from people, the internet, whatever, and they'll be taught that kind of thing. We weren't taught that when we were 19, 20. Nobody had heard of self-awareness or setting goals. It was just, I'm a professional footballer, or I've become a teacher. That's it. That's where it stops, Do you? I mean, I know obviously you're a dad as well. Are you keen to kind of pass that on to your kids in terms of goal setting early on, or do you kind of want them to make their own mistakes and sort of learn their way? Do you think?
yeah, it's such a difficult one, mate. It's a great question because I always question myself whether because I don't want to be that dad, especially or with the kids on my academy. What is this is the way you do it because
Yeah,
I've had success doing it this way, so it's important you do it like this. So obviously, I talk about goal setting, how important it is. I think,
yeah,
in my own opinion, how important it is to have a purpose. But I can't shove it down their necks
yeah.
because you know yourself. My old man used to shove things down my neck that I
Oh yes.
yeah, do you know what I mean? And I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
believe
yeah,
in
yeah.
it. And in the end, you turn your back on
Yeah,
certain things that he's saying, even if it's great advice.
yeah,
You just don't know it at the time, and you don't want to be hearing it 24/7. So it's such a difficult one to try and get the balance right. For instance, now my youngest plays for Burton.
yeah,
He was at Leicester. He's moved to Burton. He's only 11, but he's probably more talented than I was at that age. But my
really.
dad was, yeah, he's really talented, mate. But my dad was the kind of character that used to try and influence how I thought
Yeah,
24/7. If
yeah,
I
yeah,
ate a chocolate bar, you shouldn't be eating that. If you want to be a
yeah,
professional footballer, footballers don't eat that. If you're not going to bed at 7:30, he used to have a go at me. If I'm
yeah,
not performing well on an England trial, he used to have a go at me. So I've sort of been the opposite
yeah,
with my young boy. I'm like, mate, if you want to stay up, you stay up
yeah,
and you do what you want, you make your own decisions. But when I was younger, I couldn't do that
yeah,
because my old man wouldn't let me.
yeah,
So I sort of give him that breathing space. But in the end, I think if he gets to 17 and don't make it, and he turns around to me and he says, I wish you would push me more. I wish
yeah,
you would give me more influence. That's one thing I'm going to have to accept because
yeah,
I don't know which way to do it. I'm just doing it the way I think is best for him.
yeah. And I mean, is that one of the sort of philosophies that you have at the academy? Is for all of the coaches and all of the sort of people of influence to not be that authoritative, this is the way you'll do it kind of boss. You want to be the let's figure out the best way for you type of leader. Do you know what I mean? Is that something that's kind of embedded into what you do on a daily basis with those guys?
Yeah, it is, mate. I mean, I've got a business partner, and my business partner is like my dad was.
Right, okay.
So we've got a mix at the academy, and I can see that some boys enjoy listening to Owen more, my
Yeah,
business partner, and the way he sort of sets up how he's going to relay information.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the boys like how I do it.
Yeah.
Now, we've been running obviously 4 years now, and we've got some terrific results. And I wouldn't say I've influenced more of them results than my business partner has. I think
Yeah.
it's been a mix of both. I just don't think it can always come from one person.
Yeah. It's got to have a balance between the two.
I think so because you know all of a sudden you start looking fake if you're being really strong and this is the way to do it and sort of that kind of leader, very authoritative,
Yeah.
and then at other times you're not, and it will be confusing messages, I think.
Yeah.
So if I was the main boss on my own, I would definitely surround myself with people that could give a different point of view from me and a
Yeah.
different kind of style in the management team.
It's a bit more balanced than just one sort of one point of view. Um,
Yeah, I think so.
so I mean, the academy's been going now. You said it got up and running in 2016. Have you achieved all of those things that you wanted to, like having your own premises and things like that? Like, is that's all in place now?
Yeah, well, sort of halfway there. I'm sort of doing a deal with the mayor of Leicester at the minute to try and get our actual own spot, what
Right.
we own,
Okay.
on a long-term lease. At the minute, we're renting off a local football club. But what I've done is sort of build our own little empire at the side of it.
Okay.
So we've got three portable classrooms, a portable gym, a portable office, all the groundwork's done, all the security, all the fencing. So it feels like ours,
Yeah.
but it's not actually our land. We don't own it. So
Yeah.
I've sort of it's a mix of the two, but hopefully them negotiations go well with the mayor of Leicester and he gives us our own spot.
So once you've achieved that, what I mean, as you say, you've had that since 2012, so 8 years. What's the next 8 years for the business? Like, where do you see it going from here?
So as I say, it's always evolving. So the next part of the business plan would be to be our own football club.
All right. Okay.
And the reason why we decided to go down that route is because that's a goal that will never be fully achieved. And they're the
Yeah.
goals that I like the best because, as I spoke about earlier, they're the goals that are always going to keep you dragging forward.
Yeah.
So obviously, I look at people like Gary Neville
Yeah.
and what he's done with Salford City. Obviously, we're a million miles away from that, but it shows you how huge that goal is.
Yeah.
And even if we got to where Gary Neville is and with Salford City, then you're looking at teams in the Premier League, teams in the Champions League. So it probably won't happen in my lifetime, but because it's such a huge goal,
Yeah.
there is never a chance, especially in the next 20, 30 years, that I will have a Premier League team called the FSD Academy.
Yeah.
So you can see what my mind works like now. You know, I thought when I was 8 that playing in the Premier League was the hugest goal ever. And when I got there, I should have reset another goal. Right, England, World Cup, best player in the world. And you see the players that keep evolving year on year, the best players in the world, Ronaldo, Messi. They're not happy. I bet Ronaldo's goal list says he wants 15 Ballon d'Ors.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it always keeps you moving forward and you never rest on your laurels and think, right, I've achieved that goal now.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important to set them huge goals, I think.
I mean, I read something the other day. I think is he said he wants to be the first player into his, I don't know, his 50s. I don't know how old he is now, or 40s it might have been. But the scientist guy was saying, like, because of how well he looks after his body, there's every chance that so I think it's one of those, it's one of the keys to success, I would say, in you're right, in the ability to set yourself a lot of short-term goals, and once you've achieved one, then obviously move on to the next one. I'm assuming one of those goals, one of them small short-term goals, has been your new book. How did that come about?
Yeah, that was a strange one, really. The book was I actually went to the author of the book. He works at 442 magazine, you know, the football magazine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
He's deputy editor of 442, and he lived in Leicester, but I didn't know him. And he sort of emailed me and he said, "I'm deputy editor of 442. I live in Leicester. I'm a Leicester fan. Will you do an interview?" This was back in early 2019.
right.
And I thought, wow, this is pretty strange because obviously the football career was long dead a long time
Yeah,
ago. And I wasn't a household name anyway because my career wasn't big. So I thought, yeah, I'll do an interview. And it was such a good interview because he asked me certain questions that not a lot of people asked. He asked, very similar to this interview, he asked more about how life was now, the struggles that I'd gone through, because I had touched on them briefly since
yeah,
I finished football, but I hadn't really sat down and done a full-blown interview about the struggles.
yeah,
So I decided it was probably the first time ever, other than when I was in rehab, that I thought, you know what, I'm going to tell him the truth.
yeah,
And I sat there and literally I'm looking over at this bloke and I'm telling my story of drugs, drink, rehab, meeting Gaza in rehab,
yeah,
crashing cars, waking up in places with no clothes that I didn't know where I was, and drug dealers trying to get me to work for them and all this kind of crazy stuff. And he literally sat there open mouthed. And then I thought, oh, wow, I probably have been a bit too open
yeah,
here. And he was like, no, mate, this is fantastic. And anyway, he put the story out and he rang me about a month later, a couple of months later. And he said, the story's gone out on our online 442. And by this time, it was about October, I think. And he said, so far, it's the second biggest read story of 2019 in the magazine or online. So I said, wow, who was the first? And he said, a story we did on Sergio Aguero.
oh,
So I was like, who have you done stories with in 2019? And he said, everyone. Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, we've done stories on everyone. And he said, but yours has been the second biggest read.
yeah,
So I was like, wow. And it was obviously because people don't just want to hear about football.
yeah,
They want to hear about the life of footballers and not always when it goes right. You know, the trophies that you win or the amount of money you make or the cars that you drive. They want to hear that real story.
yeah,
So, and it just got before Christmas 2019, and he rang me again. He said, mate, I think you need to consider doing a book. So I laughed and I was like, mate, there's no way I'm doing a book. And then he got all the way to about, he kept asking me, month on month, he kept asking me. And then it got to about April 2020. And he rang me again. He said, what do you think? Let's do it. He said, I've sort of put a few ideas together of how I'd set it up and how I'd deliver it. And I read what he put. It was only a short sort of A4 piece of writing that he put together, but it made me intrigued reading it. And it was obviously about my story. He picked out a few of the bits and he sort of, you know, two doctors standing over me, trying to section me. My mum's in the background crying. You're like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And it was like my story. So I was like, yeah, mate, let's do it. So then we sat down and he bashed that book out in about 3 months. And it was ready with the publishers after about 3 months.
that's mad.
So that's sort of how it came about. And I'm so pleased now just because I did not want to do the book and I didn't want to earn anything from the book. All the money that comes from the book, I've already given away. The rehab place that helped me and my FSD Academy.
Yeah.
So all the money that I earned from the book, which I know this is a podcast, but don't tell no one, the money in books is awful. Especially for the guy telling the story or the author. It's terrible. So there's not that much coming from it anyway, but I gave that money away because I was just like, I can't believe how many people, mate, have bought it, number one, but number two, have sent me messages saying that it's helped them in their struggles, and they just enjoyed someone being really open and honest about the dark stuff.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned that. I mean, I'm very open about my own struggles with mental health, and I've had a sort of a period recently where I really struggled. And it's you mentioned something there when you said I'm going to be open and honest with them. I think there's levels, like peeling back an onion with mental health. If you ask somebody with that is struggling with their mental health, 9 times out of 10, I think you'll get I'm all right.
Yeah.
And then you peel that back a little bit, and you might get somebody that says, "Nah, I'm quite struggling at the minute." But then you get down to the root of it, which is obviously is the level that you were at when you've spoken to the writer of the book. And I think it's that when people read that level of honesty about struggles, it's amazing how many people go, I have that thought, or I've been at that point. And you realise how much of a common thing having, whether it's OCD, anxiety, depression, whatever it may be. And I think people find it sort of therapeutic almost to read and go, it's not just me. You know? So I take my hat off to you for being that honest, because there is still even now such a stigma around being open and honest about mental health. Have you had messages from people who have been in exactly the same situation that you were? Have you had other ex-pros reach out to you and say, look, this has happened to me?
Yeah, a few. I mean, the ones that I find not difficult, but because I take it on myself I open my DMs up on my social media, so on Twitter and on Instagram, and I said, listen, if anyone's struggling, I'm not a professional in any way, but I'm here to listen. I'll give you the best advice that I can give, and what's helped me in my life. And the amount of people that came through and really went deep with the information that they were sort of giving me, and how much of a struggle it is. And, you know, people sort of in that worst place possible, on the edge of, you know, taking their own life, where I was. And I found that really difficult, because I could feel, even just reading, you know, some of the messages, that how vulnerable that person was at that moment.
Yeah.
And it was such a hard place to be, because obviously I'm not a professional. Yeah. So I was only just trying to give my advice, and obviously I had that empathy. So I think that helped, because with my replies, I've been through what that person's been through. Yeah. But I found it a real struggle, because you don't want to say the wrong thing. Yeah. And I think I'm self-aware enough, and I know what I would have wanted to hear at those moments that I was at my lowest, that you don't want to hear things like, oh, you'll be all right, keep your head up. It's not the end of the world, you know. Yeah. You know, you got to be tougher than that. Those kind of things, those kind of sort of cliche sayings that us blokes always say to each other, man up, is they don't help. They really don't. So I knew not to say things like that and give that information, but I was just there for people. And it is hard. It is hard, because, you know, if someone says to you, how are you, mate? And you say, do you know what? I'm struggling. Yeah. That person will think, oh God, I wish I hadn't have asked. And it's only because they don't know what to say. Yeah. But my advice to people is, all you have to do is be honest. I try and be as honest as possible. If someone says to me they're really struggling, I say, listen, I may say the wrong thing. Obviously, I don't want to, but all I'm here for is to listen to you. And if I can help in any way possible, that I'm here to help and to listen, and to show you that support. And in my experience, the people that did that to me when I was really struggling, that was a real help to me. Yeah. So that's what I've sort of took on in my life now, and it's incredible, because once you've been like that, and you sort of give that information to people, that you're there to listen, that's all people want. Even some of the young lads on my academy, you know, the 16, 17-year-olds, which is kind of scary to me, that even at that age, these kids are struggling. And they feel like they haven't got anyone to speak to. So if it's me or if it's one of my staff that they can speak to, and it helps and supports them, or we can signpost them to places that can help them, that's what's important to me. And the great thing is that this is what I say to people all the time: once you're that honest and open with your own struggles, when anyone talks to you, or you feel you've given a piece of information or a bit of advice, or you've just sat there and listened to someone for 20 minutes and you can tell that you've helped that person, it raises you up as well. And you feel better. So that's why it's so important to keep talking to people.
That was going to be my next question. Have you found the whole process of obviously going through the process of writing the book, and then obviously you're receiving messages on social media, have you found that therapeutic to you to share this journey almost of managing mental health? Have you found that therapeutic in that process?
Massively. There's 3 times in my life where I really shared all the deepest, darkest, despairs of what I've been through in life. One was in rehab, and 2 was the 442 interview, and 3 was the book. And every time I've sat there and just spoke about everything and sort of got it off my chest are the times that I felt the most free, really. So because you get that good feeling when you've sort of shared and people accept, you know, what you've been through and the thought process that you're in at the time, it lifts you up. And so, especially after the book's come out, I thought it's time to just be as open and honest as possible, as much as I can. And sometimes you're open and honest to people that don't really want you to be that open and honest. But what I tell people they need to understand is you're going to get that in life. You're going to have that, you know, and some people will say to me, oh, wow, you've just overshared with that piece of information. But, you know, that's who I am now. That's the character that I am. So it's important to me to, if someone asks me, how are you feeling today? I say, a little bit depressed this morning. So I've gone for a run. I'm obviously talking to you and telling you. And, you know, some people don't like it, but it's the way it is. And as you said earlier, to raise that stigma, we have all got to talk more.
No, I think, and to be honest, I think what you're doing, you know, being in a high profile position and talking about it almost makes, it does one of 2 things. It kind of makes people realise, well, these footballers are actually human, and then it also kind of makes the people that are that I think that they're just an average Joe kind of go, well, it just levels this up a bit. Do you know what I mean? Like we're all in this together, whether you're the Queen of England or whether you're you work in an office. Like we're all in this together. We're all the same, regardless of status or financial wealth or whatever. We all struggle. The more we all share, the more it sort of destigmatizes things, but also it lifts that weight that's on your shoulders when you think it's you. And especially with mental health, when it's all in here, it's all internalized. Like I found it. Sometimes I'll have like these intrusive thoughts that the more I keep them to myself, you kind of go, oh, this is real. The more you repeat it over and over again, this is real. And then you say it out loud to somebody. Like my wife, God bless her, like she puts up with so much of my madness. But I'll say things out loud to her, and she'll go, have you heard yourself? Do you know what I mean? Do you realise how ridiculous that is? And then you kind of calm down. But if you don't have that outlet, and it's all in your head, like, you know, it's it's a dark place to be. So I take my hat off to you for being that person to to break down the stigma and the walls around mental health, especially on social media as well. It's a great place to do it because there's a lot of mental health, that sort of gets a bad rap. Or mental health gets a bad rap on social media. So being that sort of shining light to kind of say, I'm here if you need, is like, that's just going to hopefully do endless amounts of good. Mate, I could talk all day long, and I could certainly give you a lot of grief for playing for Sunderland, but we'll keep that for another podcast. Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I wish you nothing but the best on your journey, both with your mental health and with your businesses and family and everything. Thank you for joining me. We're going to do a book giveaway as well. I think you've got 2 signed books that we're going to give away. So we haven't decided how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it. So we'll obviously we'll keep in touch on social media, mate. But listen, all the best. I hope you and the family have a great Christmas and a very, very prosperous New Year, mate.
And the same to you, Phil. Thanks for having me on, mate. It's been brilliant.
No problem, mate. All the very best, and we'll speak to you soon. Cheers, mate.
Take care, mate. Cheers,
Thanks,
mate. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.